Hey everyone, we're here. We're live at Las Vegas. We're at the Venetian for the Qualys Security Conference in 22. You know, I personally, I've been going to Qualys security conferences mostly in San Francisco because they used to do them the same time as RSA conference, probably for 12, 15 years, if not more, right? Because I've been in the security world a long time. I want to introduce you to this gentleman right here, though. His name is Brian Penn. Brian is with the folks at Aflac. I'm not going to make him say it like the duck or the goose or whatever, but it's Brian from Aflac. And Brian's a veteran of Qualys security conferences as well. He's actually spoken in a few QSCs. First of all, Brian, welcome, and thanks for coming and joining with us here on Techstrong TV.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I work for Aflac. I've been with them about 7 years. I'm over their security posture program. Been with that about 6 years, and before that I did risk assessments and technology compliance. Yeah, this is my fourth Qualys conference. I made the round this year with Atlanta, Dallas, San Francisco, and now, of course, Vegas. I'll be speaking again today.
Fantastic. You know what, before we get into what you're talking about, let's talk about your role as a security posture, risk person. That's not the average title we hear from people. Let's talk about what you do there.
So, I mean, when people do ask, especially my kids, my family, I say I protect the duck. So, Aflac, if we get breached, hacked, it could be my team, and our name is the brand. So everyone knows the brand, but, my job is protect the duck. So we manage the vulnerabilities, we manage pen test findings, and we manage misconfigurations.
Excellent. And, and you don't have to say the exact Qualys products you use, but those are three things that Qualys can really help with.
Yeah, so we actually use almost the whole suite. We use PCI, we use VMDR, we use the WAS, we use the policy compliant. And so my team is more responsible for VMDR, the PCI, but then my counterparts use the application part of it, the WAS.
Sure. And that helps a lot with the when you start getting the pen testing and stuff like that. What about anything cloud-wise, the total cloud, or that's not really good?
We're getting into the cloud now, like most companies are shifting to the cloud. We've got probably, I think over the next few years, we're shifting 500 to 600 applications to the cloud.
Really?
So it's a big push for us to make sure our cloud environment is secure and we mature in the cloud.
Well, the cloud has to mature, then you can mature in the cloud.
True.
But it's
true.
getting mature. When you say the cloud, is it more like cloud native kind of things with Kubernetes? And you may not even know this. Kubernetes and containers, or just more traditional hypervisor?
We're doing a lot of stuff. Basically we're shifting our applications from on-prem to the cloud, which is also challenging because on-prem, you're there, and then as we shift up, you've got to have a lot more security control because we're going to AWS, and if you don't have the right controls, they can shut you down.
Yeah.
So it's kind of good for me because I know as we shift up, our teams are going to have to step up and be more secure.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also a good chance. Look, there are some people who do the shift and lift thing, right? And they just take it from their data center and shoot it up to the cloud. I think, I've been talking to people doing these kinds of transformations, migrations for years and years. It's also a good time to kind of take stock of what you got, why you have what you have. And if there's a time where you want to, maybe start changing things from monolith to microservices and stuff like that, well, this represents the opportunity to do all that. Let's talk a little bit about what you're speaking about here.
So what I'm speaking mainly today is our journey from going from our previous tool to where we went with Qualys about 1.5 years and how much we've matured. So when we first went to Qualys, we thought we had a very secure environment. As we started shifting into the tool, we realized, hey, we had a lot more vulnerabilities than we realized. Qualys did a great job of picking up third-party vendors' software. We didn't have knowledge of that, and so even though the risks were there, we didn't have it identified.
Yeah.
So when we first launched, I would say our highs increased significantly, but over time we've been able to reduce that about 55% due to the tool and the knowledge the tool's been able to provide us.
Are you guys using the automated remediation yet or not yet?
We would love to, but with some of the technologies, and of course you got the business owners, you got the application owners.
Well, you got a highly regulated industry
and being
there
a DOI,
too.
you can't break the environments. So one of my goals for 2023 and 2024 is getting that automation and more of a self-service. So instead of us providing the vulnerability, we just go ahead and remediate it. But you can't break your environment. So
No.
that's the challenge we struggle with today.
Well, it's not you alone. Look, I co-founded a security company back in 2001. In 2003, we had a vulnerability management solution we were offering. And we thought, why wouldn't you want to just automate your remediation? Seems like a no-brainer, right?
Right.
You got a patch it. Well, it don't work like that, especially when you get into financial or government or even healthcare. As simple as it sounds, things aren't always as simple as they sound.
No, and for us, we have DOI, which is Department of Insurance. We have to make
Yeah,
sure
sure do.
we meet their needs, and so you have to be really cautious of that.
Sure does. Sure does. What about like XDR? Has that come up, raised its
Not
kind
quite
of
yet. No, not yet. Not for us in our environment.
detection and response kind of stuff?
Yeah, we're not. Well, I wouldn't say we're using it with Qualys. We have some of our own stuff we're doing within Splunk with some other tools, but we are kind of with some of the new true risks they're doing with. We are actually right before I left our SOC team and our R team. We're actually integrating true risks to do some of that. So it's kind of worked great with when they launched it back in April. We was one of the first companies to demo it. And that's one of the things I'm speaking on again today is true risk and how it's helped us identify some of those critical vulnerabilities that are maybe not so critical, but also the ones that may be medium or low to say, hey, we need to remediate this due to their risk.
Right.
So,
Well, it's about prioritization of those
yes.
things, right? Wanted to ask you, like clearly you're using Qualys in vulnerability management, not just on your own network, but third parties. You've got this whole financial regulation because you're basically an insurance company. I know
Right.
sometimes they don't like to say insurance
Yep.
company, but you've got to answer to the insurance
Right.
departments. What's the new threats that have kind of got your attention?
I mean, I would say almost any of them, because as they change, you've got to be prepared. I mean, last month you had this Exchange vulnerability that came out. We were able to remediate in 7 days, and a lot of it was due to Qualys. I mean, I definitely want to. They had a dashboard come out. We was able to monitor it. We tracked it down. So I mean, for us, having the right threat feeds, which TrueRisk does for us, having the right tool to get the signatures and be able to identify the vulnerabilities is key. And we've been able to do that over the last year, really successful. And then provide the metrics to leadership to say, hey, we are we're being reducing the risk, but while also keeping the business running.
Love it. You mentioned that another part of your team does a lot of the kind of AppSec stuff.
Correct.
I'm wondering, has anything like around the executive order out of the White House around software supply chains and software bill of materials, SBOMs, and this kind of stuff kind of factored into what you got to do? Because, I mean, Aflac has, I'm going to guess, hundreds, if not thousands of applications.
Yeah, we have a lot, and that's the thing is you keep maturing, you got to make sure you have the right tools, but you also got to have some of the right documentation procedures to make sure that because you can have the tools or you can have the documentation, but they kind of go both together. Because for us, when the regulators come in, they first want to look at our documentation, then they go look at the tools and the data to make sure we are actually doing what we said we'd be doing.
Right.
So that's kind of key for us. And then our WAS team, they use Qualys for that as well. And I think right now we're doing 70 apps in it, and we keep growing that as well.
Good. Brian, one of the frustrating things about security is you do your job when nothing happens, right? If nothing happened, that means you're doing your job. But a lot of times, at the board level, at the C level, they don't understand that, right? They say, hey, we don't hear anything. I don't know how good it is. I know we spent a lot of money on it.
Right.
On the other hand, though, security's really become a number one priority for so many organizations. What about at Aflac? Have you guys, would you say in general, they're increasing security budget, or they understand the job you're doing?
Well, I would take a step back first. Our leadership has been very keen to this for years, even up to the executive board. We provide metrics monthly to them, and I talked to some of my peers. A lot of their executive boards don't even have a really clue, but we monitor our metrics and we send it to them, and they actually are highly engaged. So I think that's the key.
Great.
When your leadership, whether it's just a CISO or a CEO, but when it goes above that to your board, that's important, because that you'll get the funding, or you'll be able to get what you need to be able to reduce the risk. Because you can't have buy-in with them and think you're going to be successful.
No.
It starts from the very top. And so they really monitor our metrics, and we have to provide those. And they ask questions, not, oh, we just look at it. They come back with questions. And that's really key to me,
That is.
have a successful company.
No doubt about it. What about, look, hopefully we're here in person in Vegas this year, right? And we're coming back from this whole COVID, kind of everybody working in their house thing. How's that changed things at Aflac, if any?
For most employees, especially the claims, I mean, of course, I think we shifted when they made it kind of mandatory go, almost 99% of our employees in our Columbus area went remote. So, from a security standpoint, we was actually ready. We handled it well. We didn't see any drop-off. Applications didn't. Good thing with Qualys, they had the agent. So on all the laptops and workstations, we never lost monitoring for it. And I think that was really great for us because, a lot of companies, as they started shifting home, they lost visibility to their equipment or,
Absolutely.
patching. And, that's where Qualys really helped us is because we already had the agents on those systems. So as they went home, we were good to go. So we never lost traction.
Good for you. Last question. For people out there who say, look, he's talking at the Qualys event, he obviously likes Qualys or whatever. You've had experience with other solutions out in the market, right? What do you think? I mean, you mentioned Qualys found vulnerabilities the other didn't, especially in your third party. But overall, what do you think is, for someone who's considering Qualys, what was the go-to, like the real critical thing that put it over?
So for us, I mean, it's actually not a technical. First was we have Japan, which is a lot of people don't realize Japan is one of our largest revenue part of our company. And so big market, and we're almost in every household there. So for us, with our Japan counterparts, the number one actually on our POC was language. A lot of the other tools don't have that support in Japan. Right. They don't have TAMs or even support staff. So that was actually our number one driving force, more than the tool. But then as we got into Qualys and our PSC, we had our checks, just like every other company should do, your checks. We had 3 or 4 vendors, but the language really hit home. And then one of the other issues we had with some of the other vendors is finding the remediation and when it was remediated, because with our SOC 2 audits, some of the other ones, PCI, you have to show when it was remediated. Within a tool, you can do that, where a lot of the other tools, you had to add it into some kind of a system. So for us, those are 2 keys that kind of closed the gap for us as a company.
Excellent. That's always been true in Japan, man. If you want to be successful in Japan, you need to be native.
Right, and that's really key. And it helps us because as we partner with them, we'd had to get on calls with a translator, and that 10-minute conversation takes 2 hours, hour.
No, I've been there.
And so, you understand that. And so for us, having that someone there, it's reduced a lot of our time and our money and, from having to be on calls and translators. So it's been great.
Good for you, man. Hey, I know you got to go speak here. I want to let you out to get on the stage. But first of all, thanks for coming on Techstrong TV with us today. Best of luck, and thanks for all the work you're doing, man.
All right, appreciate it.
All right. Brian Penn, Aflac here.
Aflac.
At QS. I didn't make him do that, I promise. At QSC 2022, we are live at the, where the heck are we? We're at the Venetian. And we'll be back in a minute with our next guest. everyone. We're back here at the Qualys QSC Conference 2022. We're at the Venetian in Las Vegas. And our next guest, I'm really happy to, it's the first time I've interviewed him, Jonathan Tull. Jonathan is the CISO of Qualys. And hey, Jonathan, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So Jonathan, you've been CISO about a year over at Qualys.
That's right.
But if you don't mind, share with the audience a little bit of your background.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in, I guess, information technology and intelligence for quite a long time. I was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, did intel work there, so there's a lot of application from like physical, national intelligence to cybersecurity. From there, I was with the state of Colorado as the CISO and worked in the security department for 12 years. Spent a good run at Microsoft, where I ran the global incident response team. So 300 incidents around the globe, visited 18 countries with teams of reverse malware, reverse engineers, incident responders, infrastructure specialists. A lot of ransomware attacks that we would go and help large enterprises recover from. And then I've landed at Qualys as CISO. This is my actual second stint as CISO at Qualys. So I had a brief stint about 6 years ago.
Really, I thought it sounded familiar. It's funny, as I told you, I was in the security space for a long time. The security company I co-founded called Still Secure was based out of Boulder. Oh. And we had state of Colorado as a customer back then. At the time, this is going back 2005 to 2007 timeframe. Yeah. They were winning a lot of awards there because they really, the state of Colorado had a great, we called it InfoSec, not cyber then, right?
Oh yeah, no.
They had a great InfoSec department and program there.
Yeah, I ran a program there called Secure Colorado, really to centralize security. Ended up working a lot at the time with a gentleman named John Strufert, who was there with the Department of Homeland Security around the continuous diagnostic and monitoring program. And we really wanted to take what was really what I thought a best practice at the federal level and adopt kind of our state version. Mm-hmm. And then also, at the time we were maybe even before, I guess, all of the election kind of issues popped up, we were very focused even back then on helping our Secretary of State and our counties secure our election systems. Before it was, I guess, fashionable and a political topic.
Right, how timely is we're here the day after election day, right? Though we haven't heard yet of any kind of craziness, but, fodder for another conversation. We'll have you on Techstrong TV. But unfortunately, the drop-off a lot of times from the federal level of like vulnerability management and cyber in general to state and local sometimes can be drastic, right?
Yeah.
It's very choppy state to state. But I wanted to talk to you more about going on here at the QSC.
Yeah.
Our audience sitting at home saying, well, it sounds like a Qualys user conference. I know it is. It is. We're not going to say it's not. But I've been going to QSCs, I think, since Philippe started them years and years ago. And I've always found them a great industry event, a great forum to speak with peers, to talk about relevant topics. It's not just all Qualys product all the time.
Yep.
Interested in your take on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think while it is, obviously branded as a Qualys security conference, there's CISOs here from, government agencies, healthcare, manufacturing, financial services. There's security engineers that are actually implementing and working in different programs. And, if you look at the new products that we've introduced over the last couple of years, it's not just vulnerability management anymore, right? It's web app security, web app pen testing, it's patching and patch management, it's cyber asset inventory. And so, all of these, the industry's been struggling with, for forever, right? Since the beginning. And so, I think it's a lot more about the dialogue and learning best practices from peers and, how do we do this well? How do we move more efficiently? To a certain extent, we're all constrained with budgets and the macroeconomic conditions. So there's a lot of talk about, automation and how do we optimize the resources and help us focus on the most important things. And I think that's where a lot of the value comes from this conference.
Yep. And you know, well, obviously over the last year it was in person, but it was hybrid,
Yep.
virtual and in person. I believe the year before was virtual only.
Yep.
This year it's not
Yeah.
virtual at all. It's all in person. And one of the nice things, I don't know if our audience can see, because it's not like we have this is not a fake backdrop.
Yeah.
It's real, right? There are people here and they're talking to each other.
Right.
And we don't get that in the virtual space. So to me, this is a huge plus why you want to come down, meet with people, and really talk some of these topics.
Agreed.
Now, Jonathan, 2022, like most years in security, has had its challenges,
Yep, it has.
right? We've had some doozies. Ransomware is crazy.
Well,
Everyone talks about software supply chain and SBOM this and SBOM that. For you, what are the big stories for this year around cyber?
yeah, and I think obviously open source software has gotten a harder look, right? We've had some vulnerabilities that have come out, and it doesn't mean anyone's not using open source software. It just means we're now having to really consider how is it supported, how do we keep track of it. And, it goes back to inventory, but again, inventory's been hard, for a lot of companies. And I think, with the presidential executive order and, SBOM and a bill of materials is a big topic. And it's hard to get into it, but it is a very critical aspect for our industry. And for me, as a CISO of a software supply chain company, there's a lot of emphasis from our customers that I do have full control over my supply chain. And that's a very complicated task, and we're working very hard on it. I know a lot of my other peers are working very diligently on what does it mean to truly implement a supply chain security program and to deliver an SBOM that people can rely on and
That makes
trust,
sense,
right?
yeah.
That makes sense to them. So that's been a really big topic, and unfortunately, like you said, from the incident response standpoint, still 80–90% of the attacks that I see are ransomware related. Unfortunately, it's causing a lot of pain. I'm not sure I have anything more to share. I mean, it's the same traditional tactics and
I don't think
techniques,
it's a secret. I think
Yeah.
what we're seeing out there is become almost just common meat and potatoes kind of things.
Yeah.
Quickly on the issue of the open source, I think to a certain extent, open source has almost been a victim of its own success. I remember, and I'm sure you do too, everybody say Mac was so much more secure than Windows.
Right.
Well, when Windows had 95% of the market and Mac had 5%, it wasn't as big a target.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is now, 75-25 or whatever. Mac certainly has more market share than it used to, and you see attacks on Macs now. Maybe
Absolutely.
not. Windows isn't what it was either. They're both, I think, much more secure than they were in the 90s,
Yeah, I agree.
early 2000s.
Yeah.
But open source is everywhere. Something like, I forget if it's 98 or 99% of enterprises are using open source software within their...
Absolutely. I'd be shocked if
infrastructure.
anyone in the world of any size didn't have some component of open source, either a small library that's a dependency of some code, some Docker instance that was pulled down because it seemed easy to use, that was put up in some repo and shared out. And I think that's why the challenge of securing the supply chain is so difficult, right?
Yes,
you
it
have
is.
code that's openly shared, and a lot of developers share openly, right, and freely, and even whether they license it as open source or not, I mean, they're sharing their code, and sometimes the attackers know that, and they have techniques like type squatting, that will trick developers into downloading the malicious code.
The wrong containers.
Yeah.
You know what? I think that goes to fundamentally. So I started DevOps.com in 2013, 2014. And one of the trends I was seeing then was the change in the way software was built. It wasn't just an engineer sitting and writing code from scratch.
Right.
In many ways, they were assembling it like a supply chain.
Exactly.
Like, building an application. And so when you have that, all of a sudden that software supply chain becomes a big deal. So that's certainly a huge vector. You mentioned the ransomware. you know, as much as I hate it and I marvel at the organization of the bad guys,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I don't know how you solve that.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to solve it like policy related or through criminal sanctions. I mean, it's just too complicated. I mean, I think it, you know, I like applaud the people that are trying to bring, you know, those actors to justice, but there's a lot of political complications and people that are out of reach depending on what country they're operating from. And I think what we have to do is we have to, and a lot of companies are doing this now, saying, I'm going to have a ransomware threat reduction program, right? You know, I think if you don't focus your energy, right, controls can slip. And so if we know ransomware is, you know, probably the leading risk factor for a lot of us, we have to have a ransomware response program. We have to evaluate all of our controls against what ransomware would normally get in our environment, move laterally, and I think we just really have to focus on it. And you're starting to see a lot of programs that say, listen, I'm going to have a ransomware reduction program, and we're going to focus on all of the ransomware families, how they get in, how they spread. We're going to design controls around that, and I think it just takes that level of emphasis.
Really?
Now, enterprises can do it. I think it's much harder for a small business, right? And that's where a lot of the attacks are happening.
They are, and they're hit and run. They make their money and go. I realize you're the CISO at Qualys, not the product guy. But what you know, you have an XDR, and you know, what is Qualys doing anything to help maybe the mid-market with ransomware?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we've released our new EDR product and XDR, I think, are the top of really helping prevent ransomware attacks executing on an endpoint or detecting them quickly. And then on the VMDR side, which is, I mean, been a mainstay, but I think the thing is now, using threat intelligence, you know, we say these are the ransomware families, these are the specific vulnerabilities that they're leveraging, patch those first and foremost, right? Let's make it easier. You know, don't try to, I mean, most failures of vulnerability programs, in my opinion, are treating everything equal, you know, and you get 500,000 vulnerabilities and you send a report over to the IT team and they're like, oh my gosh, I hate you guys in security, right? Like, stop sending me this. When in reality, like, let's focus, right? There's 5 vulnerabilities that if we fix those, it'll reduce our risk of ransomware. So I think it's, you know, helping people prioritize. And so I think
Absolutely.
that's a big push too.
And that's always been.
Yeah.
Hey, just one more area I want to cover with you, if it's okay. 2023, we're 2 months out from the new year. I'm sure, as we said, ransomware is not going away. Software supply chain, it's going to continue being a big thing.
Yeah.
But security is as big a priority as it's ever been,
Yeah.
in everyone I speak to. What do you think for 2023 are other areas that we maybe haven't mentioned yet that we should be looking into or be cognizant of?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I don't think the industry has fully matured with the automation and the automated response as much as we had hoped. You know, I think there was great promise in SOAR and man, this is going to limit the need, and you know, we won't have to hire as many people, and honestly, I just don't see that that's played out for the industry. So I think we are experiencing some macroeconomic conditions, maybe not in cyber, but there's some pressure to say, how do we do more with fewer resources?
Yep.
And usually that leads to innovations in automation, I would hope. And then I think on the attack side, while we have the continued attacks that we have, you know, I am nervous about the just enormous growth of non-traditional computing devices and how we handle those. And I think, you know, luckily we haven't seen a tremendous, we've had a few, Colonial Pipeline, a few others where we've had like OT system impacts, but you know, the more that we have embedded computing and like very physical oriented devices that have true life safety risk, I think there's going to be an emphasis. You know, there's going to be some issue that's going to transpire that's going to really call attention to a need to better regulate, you know, look for some solutions in that space, other than what we have right now, which is unfortunately kind of isolate and let's hope nothing happens, is where we're at as an industry.
You know, we're talking about IoT devices, and there's going to be 55 billion of them in the next couple of years. It's funny, we have a virtual event next week called DevOps Experience, and one of the tracks is called DevOps of Things.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think from a security point of view, we were in stage one of, well, what the heck's out there?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Let's discover what's connected. Oh, those devices, they don't have a lot of headroom. They can't be patched.
Right.
You know, they're simple on, off.
Yeah.
But the nature of those devices are changing. As you mentioned, they're pacemakers in
Right.
people's hearts. They're other medical devices that are implanted. They're sensitive manufacturing, but they're sophisticated devices. They're not the old SCADA on-off.
On-off
gate.
switch. Yeah, exactly.
And they have real software on there, and they're upgradable.
Yeah.
They've got to be securable too, and I think that's a challenge. And it's not just the security industry's challenge. The maker of those
The
devices,
manufacturers.
right?
Yeah. And I know they're putting a lot of work into it. I mean, listen, I applaud, like the Honeywells and many of these corporations.
We were just at Honeywell last.
Yeah, they're putting a lot of effort, and I think that's absolutely, kind of the right direction. And unfortunately, it's so easy to get into software development and manufacture devices, and Microsoft and AWS provide SDKs to make it easy for developers to create these smart devices. But with that ubiquitous nature, my concern is, are we back to the point where, oh my gosh, like every C code has buffer overflows all over it, right? Thank goodness, we've moved to some more secure languages that have garbage collection and do a better job on that.
There's so much out there, man.
There's so much out there still,
right? A lot
right?
of it's legacy.
Exactly.
There is.
Exactly.
November 16th, DevOps Experience. We actually have a few tracks right on that point.
Well,
and we're
I'll
going to
tune
talk
in.
about
That's
it
great.
again and predict in January. Anyway, hey, first of all, thank you. This is the first time we've interviewed you as CISO here at Qualys, but hopefully it's not the last.
Yeah.
We invite you on. We do Techstrong TV 3 days a week, right?
That's
We
great.
always have you on here. Thank you for talking with us. It's a great show here at QSC 2022. And good luck.
Thank you.
All right.
Time.
Thank you. Hey, we're going to take a break here in Vegas, and we'll be back with QSC in just a minute. Just a minute. Hi, everyone. We're back here live at the Venetian. We're at the Qualys QSC 2022 event. We're live in person. It's good to be at in-person events. I don't know what you guys see behind us, but there's real live people talking here. And that's the kind of stuff that happens at events that you don't get on the virtual stuff. Let me introduce you to my next guest. His name is Mike Oros. He's the VP of Information Security, at Vertiv. Is that how you pronounce it? Vertiv.
You bet.
Okay. And hey, Mike. Well, we were talking. I got a little bit of your life story, but share some with your background, professional background with our audience.
Absolutely. I started out in the military a long time ago. That's about 20-something years ago, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I ended up kind of migrating towards threat intelligence and higher level cybersecurity stuff at the national level. Then I transitioned out of the government into Citigroup, which I called city government because it's as bureaucratic as the government.
Maybe even more, but go ahead.
It's just an interesting transition because people are like, well, how did you transition out of the military and the government into the private sector? And I was like, it was so easy to do because Citigroup was just like the government and the military. So from there, I got a phone call from Citrix. He said, we don't know why exactly we need you, but we need you to come here and do some stuff. So I ended up leading some security functions there. And then I ended up, coming over to Vertiv, where I work right now. And Vertiv is a company that produces data center and other critical infrastructure.
I was going to ask that next, so that was my next question.
There you go.
So when you say it produces critical infrastructure for data centers, not servers, but other equipment? Like
everything those servers are bolted to, including the power distribution.
Oh, okay.
And the remote control.
The real racks and everything.
Yeah, remote switching, like switch from one device to another so you can control it and configure it remotely.
We used to call it power ping and pipe.
Yeah.
Back in my
PDUs, right?
Yep.
That sort of stuff. That's what we do.
During the .com, I had helped the company. We were what they called an ASP, application service provider.
Okay.
This is before there was cloud.
Oh, it was client-server architecture, right?
You
You're just
betcha.
doing it at scale.
Well, we were trying to.
You were trying.
We were trying.
You were the pre-cloud.
Yeah. We were doing Lotus, that shows you, I don't want to date myself.
Lotus Notes.
Lotus Notes, PeopleSoft, Oracle, a little bit of that, Lawson. It was.
I read a book about that where they talked about that. It was called Crossing the Chasm.
Yeah.
Everybody's read that one. They talk about that. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a history lesson. I'm mowing my lawn. It's just a good refresher.
It was an experience.
Right.
But we also operated data centers, right, in Atlanta and Virginia, and we had one in London.
Not
France.
Ashburn, where, another big three-letter.
No, not Ashburn, because in the later life, I actually sold over there. But no, we had taken over an old AOL data center in Tyson's Corner.
Oh, wow, okay. Tyson's Corner.
We were Dell hosts at the time, too. We were an OEM of Dell, but we were also a Sun provider and an IBM Lotus Notes.
Yeah.
So depending which company's executive was in town, we would move the servers around, to make sure they were front and center.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
But
you're trying to scale. Hey, you had to meet demand.
And when you had to,
there was no concept of uptime at the moment.
No.
Yeah.
Well, we did. We had we didn't have 5 nines. It was a very different world.
It was solid. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, hey. Wanted to talk to you a little bit. Actually, before we get into it, is this your first QSC? Have you been here before?
I've never been to a QSC before, but I've been a Qualys customer probably dating back, 6 years now. Had 2 different roles. 7.
So, after I left that ASP, I started a security company in Colorado, and we were an early Qualys competitor.
Oh wow! Okay.
And back then, I thought they were crazy, because they were scanning and keeping stuff. It wasn't the cloud, but externally. Excuse me. But one of the things that Qualys was always known for was sort of that attacker's eye view of your network.
That's right.
Right? What do you look like to an outsider, to an attacker? Now, today, that's kind of, that's bread and butter. You need to know that. But I wanted to ask you, is it still like that? Is it still relevant and important? What's new in that kind of view of things? tell us, man, if you don't mind, share with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really interesting about like the external attacker or bird's eye view is the fact that many people should be conducting pen tests anyways, right? If you're a large enterprise, you need to conduct a pen test annually, at least externally, internally. You need to have that attacker's point of view, and the first step of attack is the enumeration scan to enumerate what assets are facing externally, and then you do a vulnerability scan, then you detect what is there to exploit, and then you go from there. So it's moving kind of from like a once a year thing now into like a phase where people now have the tools, even the entry level people in cybersecurity. It's a little more, I guess, democratized, so to speak.
Yeah.
From a perspective of being able to, if I can pick up the tool and have no training, they try to say, Mike, you need training first before you use Qualys. I'm like, no, I don't. Just give me access to it, make me an admin, and let me go. And I'll see what I can do.
I don't want to use
It's
the word.
intuitive. It's easy
Right.
to use.
Well, Qualys has always been
that's
known,
it.
right? They did have a great intuitive thing. I think one of the problems, though, with this attacker's eye view that we didn't have when I was more involved in the, at that level, is today our networks, our attack surface, if you will, is so much greater. I mean, back then, I just worried what was in my data center.
That's right.
Right? Well, I had 2 data centers, and they were big
Yeah, hub and
machines in
spoke
racks,
network, right?
right? They weren't these little, dense things. And today, I think organizations struggle with an accurate picture of their assets, and you can't protect what you don't know is there.
They do. And that's a really great point you're making. And it's largely because people have many different levels and abstractions of cloud services. You have IaaS, you have PaaS, you got SaaS products. You can't go scanning all those things because you have to look at your terms of service and what you get from your provider and what you don't get, and you have to acutely know the difference because you could be in a situation where you configure a server in a public cloud environment that you're going to expose to the internet. Certain circumstances, you would hairpin that back to a data center that you control and egress through your own firewall. That's again that back like an extension of your corporate network. So if you have an extension of your corporate network where you're hairpinning back through your hub, yeah, you can treat it as like an extension of your on-premise environment. Now, if you have devices hosted in the internet, servers exposed to the internet where an attacker can see it, and the cloud service provider isn't providing that security or patching it, you're accountable to do that. Now, if you move up the abstraction layers to the point where you're at, ephemeral containers or something like that, or you're dealing with SaaS applications, that's the beauty of SaaS. You're not accountable to that because you're transferring that responsibility off to a third party, and they're handling that old client-server application. Now they're serving it to you as a service.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the benefit.
Well, as much as things change, some things don't.
Some things don't.
Yeah, that's the benefit.
You're not off the hook just because you're in the cloud.
Absolutely. And in some ways, it's more complicated because it's not right in your face the way it is in a data center, right? Let's talk a little bit about how you use Qualys for this.
Qualys, you know what? We started with VMDR, which is vulnerability management.
Sure.
And when I began talking with Qualys, I'm like, wait, you make an asset, like cybersecurity asset management tool? That's great. Bring it all together. So then I was like, you make a web application scanner? I can use one of those.
Absolutely.
I'll give it a try. You know what? We have multiple different types of applications, and I do buy some other vulnerability scanning tools, but there's no greater value than having one pane of glass where you can optimize the resource utilization. And I'm going to kind of be talking about that a little later today in my session. But the bottom line is we use Qualys to scan all those environments and scan all those hosts. We use it to scan virtual machines. I use it to scan and detect like the versioning of the security tools I've deployed, like Zscaler. We have clients that we run, and we want to make sure those are in support. We have our VPN clients. I want to make sure those are the correct version. They're not end of life, end of support. So who would have thought you can use a vulnerability management tool, what everybody thought was vulnerability management, I can use it to patch. So I can scan, I can find issues with components within apps, I can use it to detect vulnerable apps, end of life, end of support apps, and now I can push a button and patch it. Last week I was patching
Really?
system. I thought I broke something, but it turns out it was 2 other applications fighting for control with one another.
Yeah,
Security
yes,
apps,
yes.
no less, right?
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because my own private little survey, right? Look, this whole issue of automation, as the economy gets crappy, right? Companies want to do more with less.
Do more, you're right.
Less people, less headcount. People are expensive. And so maybe because we've had automation available for patching for a long time. Granted, it wasn't perfect. There were issues, but we've had automation around, and it hasn't gone mainstream as much as we would like. Maybe this is the kind, this economic situation is what we need to give it that push
You're right.
and say,
There's some
guys,
secret
give it a
sauce
try.
to it, though. So I'm happy to share that. It's because
It's not just with me, though.
Yeah,
but go
okay,
ahead.
no, I'm sorry.
Just a couple of thousand.
yeah,
people,
exactly.
No worry,
I'm
go
very
ahead.
happy to talk to that right there. So it's the proverbial challenge of asset management and assigning ownership to those applications. So oftentimes you run in a complex hybrid environment. You got some applications that, hey, we bought it 15, 20 years ago. It was working great then. It works great now. But let's face it. Some of the parts of that thing were maybe open source. Maybe they're vulnerable. Maybe something can be exploited. Just because it works great doesn't mean it is in fact secure. So it's like anything. You have to basically have a thorough understanding of your environment. What are the interdependencies for those applications? And let's say browsers, great example. What if you have an application that uses a legacy browser and you go patching everything? You just broke manufacturing. I just affected an order worth $15 million, and I got a plant manager who's angry, who can't deliver. So it's really critical to have your assets identified, enumerated, and then broken down into buckets. Because if you do go down that path of automated patching, you want to do it in a responsible way that doesn't break the business.
Absolutely. That's the best definition and advice we've
I've
gotten
been thinking
here.
about it for a while because I've broken
so
the
have
business
I.
a few
Yeah, well,
times.
we all have. You talk about Citi. I remember going to talk to Citi 15 years ago about vulnerability management and patching. They had 3 different CIOs,
Oh yeah.
right? There was
Sure.
like 3 their average patch, like time to patch, was 90 days.
That doesn't sound bad to me though.
Well,
For an organization that size,
well, it
300K
was
employees.
if they were lucky, and but they couldn't see where they'd ever get beyond that. That was as good as it got for them. They
Limitations of the technology at the time.
well, at the time too. You're right. Anyway, hey, Mike, thanks for joining us. Thanks for speaking at QSC as well, man. That's
Yeah,
a pleasure.
it was a pleasure.
Hey, if you want to see people like Mike and get a chance to talk to him, that's what the QSC program here is all about. Maybe you want to check it out when it comes to a town near you. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be back in just a moment. everyone. Thanks for joining us back here at the Bellagio in Las Vegas for the Qualys Security Conference. If you can't tell by the lighting, it's getting a little later in the afternoon. It's a little colder than it was earlier, but it's still great to just be here, to be outside as well as was kind of a bonus for us.
Yeah.
I'm here with Sarah Griffith. Sarah is a real live Qualys customer, or her company is anyway. And she's agreed to come on and talk to us a little bit about herself, her company, and why she came to this year's Qualys Security Conference. Hey, Sarah, welcome
Hi.
to Techstrong TV.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So I guess we should get the preliminary stuff out of the way. Who do you work for? What do you do?
Sure. So I'm a CISO for a company called Euronet Worldwide. We're a public financial services company. We do financial transaction processing. We service about 170 countries all over the world, both end-to-end consumers, customers, and businesses. And yeah, I've led the security practice for 8 years now, but I've been with the company 16. So,
Wow, that's amazing. That's great.
I know.
Congratulations.
Crazy. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. We do a video program called CISO Talk. And my friend Matt Newell, who's the CISO at Unisys, is the co-host. And it amazes, I mean, being a CISO is a hard enough job. Right? Actually, Ben Carr from Qualys has been on a few of them with us.
Yes.
It's just, in today's world with COVID and everything going on, it was hard before.
Yeah.
It's really changed. But let's we'll talk about that. But you know, you're here at the Qualys Security Conference. Is this the first conference you've been to since COVID?
This is my second. I actually came to Black Hat here in Vegas in
Did
August.
You are brave.
It was miserable. It was hot, but
yeah, it's hot in August here.
So that was my first conference back. So this is my second, but this one's a lot more pleasant. But
It's a little cooler for sure.
Yeah, but Black Hat, it was, you know, I had a lot of the standard vendor meetings with current vendors, a few potential ones. So that's the one time a year you can kind of meet with everybody, and you know, they can show you, you know, new ways you can be utilizing either their current product or new features, and kind of work through those roadmaps, and then meet with other vendors. But this is my first Qualys conference I've actually been to in person.
Oh, you have not been to a Qualys Security Conference?
No.
So so this is my second conference, I should say as well. I was in LA last month for KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, which is not as much security, but you know, that whole Cloud Native ecosystem.
Yep.
But I've been to several Qualys security conferences. This is the first one in Vegas because they're usually around RSA conference in San Francisco.
Yep.
And you know, it's all one mumble jumble of security people.
Yes.
But this one is out here in Vegas. So what made you come out?
I mean, we've been a Qualys customer for several years now. And actually, I met with Shailesh, the head of VP or product development, when I was at Black Hat. And I was just kind of telling him about, here's some things that I love about the Qualys product. Here's some features I actually use as a CISO. I actually get my hands on it, and I'm looking up things in their vulnerability management platform or asset management. And I was asking him about some new products that we're utilizing. And he just, you know, said, you know, I think it'd be great if you wanted to come and talk about, like, you're a CISO and you actually use the product, and we'd love to hear about some of your use cases. It'd be nice to share with our other customers. And then personally, I just wanted to come because even though a lot of my team, you know, maybe some of the more technical guys are using Qualys even more than me, or the infrastructure teams, I want to learn more about it. I like the product, but I know there's a lot more room for me to learn, even the best way to optimize it and use it. So even as a CISO, and just for reporting and just checking in, you know, on the status of our ecosystem, you know, using Qualys. So I wanted to be out here to also learn more about
that's a
that
great
as well.
reason.
Yeah.
You know, so I've been in the security world for about 20, 25 years. I remember when Qualys kind of kicked off, right? I will tell you, the Qualys you see here today, what they're talking about, is very, very different than the Qualys of even 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Back then, it was primarily a security scanner, vulnerability management.
Yep.
Where now it's much more of a platform play, right? They've instituted the
definitely.
agent
Yeah.
and automating patching.
Yeah.
And you know, like this, I don't know if you're using, for instance, the ransomware.
We're not using it yet, but we're going to test it out. You know,
Yeah,
next year.
no,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's great.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I don't know your background as a CISO, but my background in security is Yeah, there are 0 days and exotic, crazy attacks that you probably can't help.
Yeah.
But if you could just take care of the basic block and tackling,
Yeah.
that's 80. I think that's 80%
Yeah.
of the job.
Yeah. The basics, getting those
Yeah,
basics covered.
Just the basics, right? These are the things.
Yeah.
These are the vulnerabilities that ransomware
Yeah.
utilizes,
Yeah.
which is really the crux of the Qualys
Yes.
solution. There's about 150 CVEs that 99% of all the ransomware
Yep.
is using.
Yep.
If you can knock those off,
Yeah.
you've
It's a start.
reduced your risk to ransomware exponentially.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And look, whether Qualys said that or another company, it doesn't make a difference to me. Just knowing that and being able and having that actionable intelligence,
Yeah.
you're almost negligent not
Yeah.
to do it,
No,
right?
definitely. It's just helping you prioritize. I mean, they already have a solution that helps you prioritize patching and what are your most severe vulnerabilities. But to even hone in on ransomware and taking a lot of the different telemetry and different data that's already in Qualys, but then like letting you conceptually see this is like true vulnerabilities related to ransomware that's been exposed, that are sitting in your environment. It definitely makes sense. And then they're adding in the patch management with that as well. So being able to
Yes.
automatically remediate that, as you allow in your ecosystem
Some people
it's great.
go for it,
Yeah.
some people
Yes.
not so much.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another question. So you brought up the fact that, I've got more technical people on the team, but I want to learn more.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things of the CISO job, and I'm sure you, having done it now for years, is translating security talk to business talk
Mm-hmm.
for
Yes.
your fellow C-levels and the people
The
you
board and yes.
report to,
Yeah.
and the board and so forth. Have you ever thought about giving them like a view into Qualys, for instance, or something, or just right over their head?
I mean,
It's
I don't know if I'd give them a view into Qualys. Like the board, it might be a little too much, but
Right.
I can say we have an annual leadership meeting where typically we are doing a presentation, or I'm doing a presentation on security every year. It's a pivotal foundation of our company. I mean, we do
sure,
financial
you're in financial.
transaction processing. So
Right.
we do share some of those dashboards and we show them some of metrics of what we've improved. We show them some of the Qualys metrics as well. So we do actually show our business management that. And I think one of the things that helped us with the vulnerability management is we could create dashboards based on different business entities. And we use tagging to show these are assets that belong to this business segment or this business entity. And now we can actually take that, show it tangibly to the head of IT, the head of the country manager, the business leader, and security, and they're all sitting in the room saying, "Okay, we've told you have these risks, but you can actually see it right here." So, I mean, we are using it to communicate to the business, and luckily, in my experience, I was director of internal audit, and I was an auditor for a long time, so I was comfortable. I guess I had to present to the
Talk
board
business, right.
for audit committee meetings. So like that's probably one benefit I have is in the CISO role is I've had that experience of getting to work with the board and our management teams and knowing how to convey. I think a lot of CISOs maybe that come up on the IT side, those technical acronyms and things they throw out. Sometimes the board, it's they don't even know what you're
It's
talking about.
alphabet
Sometimes
soup
like
to them.
to a lot of people. So I think that's a key trait that I think a lot of CISOs have to build is how do you communicate this to the board? Because they just want to know like what is our biggest threat and what are we doing about it? They don't need to know every single stat and metric that you have out there. It's great to see how you've improved, but they want to know what's the true risk to our business
Right.
and what are you doing about it? So
And that's the business aspect
Yeah.
of it, right? What
Yeah.
is the risk? Where's my exposure?
yep.
What is
Yeah.
my exposure?
Yeah.
So I get all that. Let's talk. It's been a crazy year and a
Yeah.
half
Yes.
with COVID and everything, right? And we've seen several not new, because very little is really new. It's just evolutionary. But certainly ransomware has become a very popular attack vector. Supply chain attacks.
Yeah.
It was all the rage for a little bit here.
Yeah.
People working remote and that kind of work from anywhere, and how do we lock that down? They're not VPNing in, they might be going cloud direct.
Yeah.
Several new kind of wrinkles
Yeah.
that we've had to
Right.
deal with. As we sit here now, almost the end of 2021, what kind of keeps you up at night? What are the challenges that you say, this one's scary?
Yeah. I mean, all those that you mentioned are scary, of course, but are we are we acting on and continuously monitoring, those controls or utilizing those tools that we have to the best ability? Are we actually, following up on those alerts and closing those vulnerabilities? And because it takes one vulnerability, it takes one way in, whether it's through your employee, through spear phishing, or whether it's through a vulnerability that's not patched. There's always that risk that there's always a root cause when you have any incident or a breach or anything. So, you're always thinking like, I hope all of our teams are, taking, like, we're not becoming complacent to security, and we're thinking about it through, all the different teams, not just IT and security. So we're even our developers and everything like that. But I mean, ransomware, of course, is a risk that we've seen more prevalent in the last few years. And I think we're constantly trying to assess too, what other controls are we doing besides just vulnerability management to help us, prevent or detect, or not even detect, but more prevent and be prepared if ransomware would hit. But I think you always have the risk of, are you looking at a holistic view of your whole ecosystem, which is one thing that I'm not trying to just pitch Qualys, but it helps us. We have on that global asset management, we can look at our assets across the globe in 48 countries or so at the, click of a button. And so that helps us to see, okay, do we have those security agents or tools that we're using deployed on all of those endpoints, or servers or endpoints. So that's one way that definitely Qualys helps us, but we just want to make sure our teams are, we're utilizing what we're the security tools and controls that we have, and we're not missing anything. And we have enough procedures and tools and controls in place to help us detect if something came in a quick manner. So.
Yeah, no, I said this before. You can't protect what you don't know you even have.
Exactly.
And like today, for instance, API. I don't know if there's a problem with you guys, but API security has really become a major thing.
It's become a hot topic recently.
It really is.
Yes.
It's kind of the new AppSec. But, so I've spoken to a lot of people about this. The biggest issue we see is most people, what APIs do you have?
Yeah, exactly.
What APIs are you using?
Yeah.
They don't have
Are they rogue APIs? Are they known APIs? Yes, exactly.
They have no idea. Do you have 1,000 APIs, 10,000 APIs, two APIs?
Yeah. Are you cataloging them? Are we updating that?
And we need API asset management, if you will. I think that's the first step of a 12-step program. But I hear you with that. It's an interesting thing.
And so many more web applications and APIs connecting, tools together and communicating, authenticating. So it's definitely become more prevalent, I'd say, in the last couple years too, the use of APIs. And then just like you said, do you even know all the APIs you're using? It's kind of that shadow IT aspect too. Like we may not even know
what apps people are spinning up. And that'll keep you up at night.
Yes.
I would imagine it is. Sarah, I want to thank you for coming and joining us here. This was great.
Yeah.
Your presentation, right? Well received. And I'm not sure. I think Qualys is making these presentations available online in a hybrid.
Yes, I heard they are.
So
yes,
you
they should all.
For those watching at home, you can check it out.
Yes.
But keep up the great work. It's so great to hear it's a feel-good story for once.
It's nice. Hopefully my presentation or other customer presentations just help people know. I mean, I know as a CISO, you have security vendors coming at you all the time, every day, relentlessly.
Relentlessly, yes.
So when we're really considering a vendor, I want to talk to other customers or CISOs not necessarily CISOs, but any customers.
Not to the vendors.
And you want to hear, I was happy to come and share our use cases and success stories. So hopefully it helps
more
others.
People were like you.
Yeah.
I was a vendor for a good part of my life until about 8 years ago. And for 20 years, I did the venture-backed startup thing in security. And it's hard. It's hard to get people to speak up.
Yeah.
Not that we're not going to blast you on TV or something, but just, a lot of people don't like to talk about their security.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a balance because there's always threat actors out there, that could target you or whatever.
God knows.
I mean, we're careful about talking about our security stack or, even what you share with auditors. You want to be, I was an auditor. I know how that is. But even just, you want to be careful because they may try to take any vendor you're working with or any type of system you're working with to try to exploit that however they can. So,
This is why we can't have nice things.
Yes, exactly.
Sarah Griffith here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with our continuing coverage of the Qualys Security Conference live at Bellagio in Las Vegas. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, we're back here wrapping up our coverage of the Qualis Security Conference. We're live at the Bellagio, outdoors over the enclosed, I guess, I don't know if they call it a portico or a patio.
Something like that.
Portico's pretty fancy. I'll go with it. Anyway, my guest right here is Francis Finley, goes by Finn. Finn is with Equifax, and he's presenting here at Qualis Security Conference, but I don't want to steal your story, Francis. Tell your story a little bit.
So what I was mainly talking about was a lot of the security transformation we've gone through, just those years since the breach, a little bit, how the culture shifted a lot, which while there's a lot of monetary investment that did a lot, but the culture shift and how things work had to do a lot with that, and how Qualis kind of mirrored that new culture we're trying to create a little bit.
Very cool. Let's do a little background, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What's your position at Equifax?
So let's see, I'm the VP of Cyber Detection, Response, and Vulnerability Management. So that's a really long way of saying I've got a bunch of teams that do incident response, security, doing something about it.
Absolutely. And I mean, so I should say, as we were talking off camera, we put on the DevSecOps event at RSA every year. 2020, last year, right before COVID, we had our DevSecOps, and we had two of the senior folks at Equifax talk about a similar subject, sort of post-Struts incident, right? That's what I call it, the Struts incident, Struts 2 incident. But the fact that they've actually hired someone with your title and responsibilities is evidence of a changing culture there. And I don't know what your talk was. I'm going to give you a chance to talk about it. But before we do, I want to preface it by saying this. What happened to Equifax in terms of having an old version of an open source component be exploited can happen to anyone, can happen to any company out there. In fact, I've seen surveys that even after the Equifax breach, and it became publicly known that it was an old version of Struts, they were still downloading the old version of Struts to install, right? So it wasn't that happened at Equifax was, they used an old version of Struts that caused that. That stuff happens. But the culture of Equifax, from what we've, they've been like business school studies on this, right? Was probably not horrifying, but was most shocking, is that it was really kind of thin on the security side of things a bit. And, they didn't have a culture of, hey, we got to take this really, really seriously. And it's, again, not just Equifax, every company does. We've seen this past year with ransomware and supply chains, the SolarWinds, the Microsoft, one after the next. If people don't take security, cyber seriously, you will be the next headline. That being said, Francis, let's talk about what Equifax has done post-Struts.
Gotcha. So I was there through all of that. I was actually on in 2014, so I got to live that incident from the.
Man, God bless you.
Yep. So the long days and nights responding to that, and all the fun fallout afterwards, and I got to see that shift firsthand.
Yep.
And it wasn't that anybody was like lackadaisical, not taking things serious and like that. No. It was organizationally different, slightly different culture. Security is part of legal at the time, so it had a very compliance
which thought. Again was not unusual in and of itself.
Yeah. So the big shifts there is that, and what I was kind of talking about was, while we had some new leadership come in, a lot of the people that were there before are still there now. And oddly enough, through that crisis, we security and technology teams actually got to figure out whatever each other's challenges were. So, your big thing you were trying to solve is I've got to meet this customer demand in this time, and I've got to do what I can to meet this customer's requirements, and I got to get it out on this day. So they had those set of requirements. And we got to have that conversation of technology teams, oh, why are you telling me to do this? Oh, this is why. And so, oddly enough, we ended up becoming kind of fast friends as far as that goes. And the new leadership came in and just reinforced that. It had already kind of started before they walked in, and then they helped foster that and grow that with the money and the leadership and everything else, to where it became a really cooperative. We get it's one mission now.
Yep.
One Equifax is the term they throw out all the time.
Right.
Like, it's all our mission, work for this.
I mean, look, I founded DevOps.com in 2013, launched 2014. I have 20 plus years in security.
Yep.
What you just described is exactly the reason I got into the whole DevOps thing, which was that security shouldn't be part of legal, right?
Yep.
Or part of finance and that whole risk thing that's over there. Security is inherently part or wrapped and with IT. And if it's not with IT, you created a wall that's very hard to climb over. And then what we've seen with, I've been putting on the DevSecOps event I mentioned to you. This will be the 6th year that we do it. All along, what we tried to do was bring the DevOps tribe and the security community together. Because as you know, Finn, it wasn't always like that, right? The dev and the ops folks felt that, these security people, frankly, they're just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
They're just the people who say
it's
no.
It's a gate. It's a thing I got to try to figure out how to get through, and
and don't tell them till I have to, because they're just going to complicate it.
Yep.
Where the security people, they're not angels either, right? And they would be like, you know what, those people don't give a crap about security. If I'm not here being vigilant, these guys will get us all thrown in jail or worse.
Yeah.
Right? And, but a funny thing happens when you bring people together. You recognize that they're all people, and we all do have one aim. Let's make it, in this case, it's Equifax. Let's make it the best Equifax it can be. Let's, the success of our employer and the company we work with is our success.
Yep.
And so when you can set aside those preconceived notions, you can get stuff done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, but it's, to be fair, and as I'm sure you're aware now, sometimes that's easier said than done.
Yes, it is very difficult to do that, because it's a lot of people's entry into security is from a compliance checkbox type thing, not necessarily, I've had to deploy stuff and I've had to do it under a deadline, and I've had to figure out how to
They don't get it necessarily.
Yeah. And some people on the IT side are coming in from the, hey, I watched a video on how to deploy this Kubernetes thing, and this is how the guy did it. And cool, I'm gonna take this stuff I learned in the lab and deploy it out
in real life.
Yeah. So there's opportunities for everybody to learn there, and anybody that thinks they know all of it is they're sadly mistaken.
Absolutely. I've got a few questions I want to ask you. Hey everyone, we're back here live at the Venetian for Qualis's QSC 2022. It's always one of my favorite events to do because you get to meet real security people, and not just people who I'm interviewing, but even if you look behind us, there are people standing around. You know what? We missed this when we were all working from home. You can't do this virtually. So it's nice. It's nice to be back. It's nice to hear security people talking. Speaking of security, let me introduce you to my next guest. I'm going to put on my glasses so I don't mess this up. It's Delane Miley.
That's correct.
Okay, and Delane is with Mercury Financial. And before we get into the great presentation she's doing in her case study, I'm going to ask Delane to tell us a little bit about herself and Mercury Financial.
Sure. So my name is Delane Miley. I'm a senior cloud security engineer with Mercury. I've been in the security industry, I guess, just a little over 5 years now. And I've been at Mercury for about 3. So Mercury Financial is a fintech company. We really focused on being an inclusive fintech company. That is our goal. So we were founded in 2013, and our whole goal is about helping everyday Americans build better credit so they can have a better life.
That's fantastic. And you know what, in case anyone's interested, website for Mercury
Yes,
Financial?
mercuryfinancial.com. We are based out of Austin, Texas. We also have an office in Delaware as well.
Beautiful. Austin's a great town.
Love it.
So that's interesting. And you know what, fintechs are such a hotbed of innovation.
Absolutely.
There's some great stuff coming out of here. Do you mind if I ask you a couple personal questions?
Sure.
Not too personal. So, senior cloud security engineer, how did you get into this?
Kind of by accident. I mean, I grew up in a generation that, we were just kind of around tech forever. It never really was something I kind of thought I could make a career until I kind of stumbled upon it in college and found out that security was a thing. It was something that I could make a career, and it was a way that I found that I could make a hobby into an actual profession, which was very exciting. And it's very much worked out because when you're passionate about something, it just makes it easier to do your job every day. And I love that it's such an ever-changing industry. There's always something new to learn. There's always something new to discover, and I love it.
You're preaching to the choir. I mean, I've been in security. I'm ashamed to tell you how old I am, but I've been in security about more than 25 years. Mm-hmm. And like you, got into it quite by accident. And they didn't have it in college when I went to college. But did get into security. One of the most common questions I get, more from my kids and their friends,
Sure.
not my kids, but their friends. They've taken security classes in college. They're interested in a career in cyber. Where do you start? How do you can't get that first job because every first job wants you to have experience. Well, I have no experience, but I did take some classes. Advice for everyone out here. How'd you get in?
It's tough. I will say I was just having a conversation with a friend about this the other day. And it is hard because it's, there's so many jobs that, and I could get on a whole soapbox about this because I think it is kind of a problem with the industry of expecting too much experience from entry-level folks right now, especially when so much of it is not in a formal setting. My degree was management information systems with a focus in security, but it wasn't, a bachelor's in cybersecurity. That's just,
right.
There's more of those now, but it's still not super common. And so really it's just a matter of poking around at everything you can, find something you enjoy. I mean, for me, it was building a home media server on a Raspberry Pi because I was bored and it looked like a fun tool. And from that I realized I was learning more about command line stuff, and from then you can apply that to all different kinds of tools. And so I think it's really just find something you're interested in and just start poking around in it, really, and just find something that you can have fun with, whether that's some of the websites was like Hack This Box or things like that are just out there for people to use.
Yep.
And from there I think it's a matter of just applying everywhere you can and find a culture that you work with. That was I got lucky with that at Mercury, that a lot of our hiring is much more about, can you work with our team? You know, as long as you are an intelligent individual, we can teach you what you need to know, but do you work well enough with us that we can teach you that?
And that
So
is
be
the big-
teachable. That's a key right there
that,
too.
You know, coachable.
Yeah.
And that's true. It's true in security. It's true in tech. It's true in life, right? Being coachable is a huge thing. You know, the nice thing about working in a fintech like Mercury Financial is you don't have a lot of legacy, old stuff. There's a lot that, you know, they're kind of born in the cloud
Yeah.
to a certain degree. So you get to work, not in a green field, but in a newer environment where you can take advantage of, you know, some of the newer technologies that you have available to you. You're speaking here at QSC, and I want to get this right, so I'm putting on my glasses. Harnessing self-service and risk prioritization to drive compliance and remediation efficiency. So look, I founded a company that came out with a vulnerability manager in 2003.
Okay.
We've been fighting this fight.
Oh yeah.
Philippe Courteau, the founder of Qualys, was a contemporary of mine. He was fighting this fight. We've been fighting it as an industry, right? The ability not only to find a vulnerability, but to patch it. The ability to automate patching. I keep thinking this is the year, right, where we're really going to automate it. You know, compliance kind of really came on in like maybe 2005, 2007, where we started doing compliance instead of security in many cases. Now it's kind of found its equilibrium, I think. But talk to me. What do you know, in your talk, what are you going to talk about? Maybe some best practices, some good things. Share it with our audience. No secrets.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So, well, you talk about us being a fintech, and so we were founded in 2013. You know, we're just now coming up on the 10-year mark, but even so, it's weird to say that a company that's less than 10 years old could have legacy systems, but
No,
everyone
10
has
years of technical
exactly
debt.
like 10 years of tech is a lifetime compared to most industries. But even with that, our entire focus has been AWS. You know, so we're cloud native, and that has been a huge win for us. You know, in so many ways, and a lot of that is with looking at things like vulnerabilities and risk. And I think you make a good point of, you know, going from patching to compliance to and how they work together. So my background, I started my career as a consultant at PwC. So I have a little bit more of that kind of, you know, GRC-esque mindset when looking at this. And so that's kind of what I want to really hit on. That's kind of the plan with really the talk, is really looking at how can we take this raw data that's coming out of Qualys, how can we take the numbers on the patches that we've got and the vulnerabilities and what we're doing with that, and then how do you apply a risk lens to that to really decide, okay, you know, where do I focus here? Who is focusing on what? That's really important with the self-service part of things. You know, we have, I believe I counted 6 different teams that are in Qualys for different purposes on, you know, most of them a daily basis. And so being able to really tailor, you know, the different parts of the tool and different, you know, reports and such to those different teams is huge. But then it's a matter of, you've got all this data, what do you do with it? And being able to contextualize it partially for a, you know, remediation plan. So, okay, what is more important to me? What is, you know, what should I patch first? But then also taking that to an executive level and saying, you know, this is what our raw tech looks like, and then this is how that translates to risk and to business decisions that need to be made. Yeah.
So that's another that you provide in security, right? Is I for instance, at RSA conference one year, I once was on a panel of what metrics do we show the exec team, the C-level and the board level, you know, and there was someone on the panel who flat out said, well, you got to dumb it down, right? and that kind of is really funny when you think about it, right? But you don't have to dumb it down, but how do we translate security speak to business speak? And when should we do? Because I'm also of the opinion that sometimes security people have to learn a little business speak, right?
It goes both ways.
Absolutely, it's a two-way street. So, what advice do you have for people?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I think this could go into another potential soapbox of data visualization, which is another love
okay.
of mine. And part of the reason I say that is because I think visualizing your data and visualizing things like risk or risk scores within vulnerabilities, for example, is kind of an easy way to translate information. If someone, just seeing numbers on a page, okay, what does that mean? But then if you can, visualize it in a way that makes sense, like all the Qualys dashboards that are offered.
Yep.
And the reason I say that, shout out Dr. Tripp from Baylor, I took a data visualization class, and he started class by saying data visualization could have changed the outcome of the Challenger explosion, and here is why. And that has stuck with me. And so
It's powerful.
it's amazing. And so I kind of take that approach to things when I'm trying to think of how can I translate something. Because translating things in words from business to tech, sometimes even the same words mean different things depending on which teams you're talking to. But if you can display it in a way that is easy to see and easy to understand, that goes such a long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and look, I'm not an expert on the Qualys product, but I know my way around it pretty well from being in the industry. One of the things they have with their dashboards is different views for who you are
Exactly.
within an industry. You want to be you're a manager, you're a direct, a hire, you're a practitioner. They give you views that are relevant to you. How do you, now of course, it's all about how you dial in the dials, right? In your position, right, you're at that border, right, where the translation's happening. Do you struggle with it? Is it something you kind of got down at this point?
I like to think I do, but there's always room for improvement. And I think it's something that kind of comes with practice and understanding your environment, because it's also different kind of depending on who you're talking to. I mean, that was something I worked with in, the consulting spaces. You're dealing with a different client sometimes every week. And so you have to learn how to translate that to the people that you're talking to for them to understand. I've been at Mercury long enough now, it's a little easier because I know, what our board and what our executives can do it, expect. So it's kind of a little easier to translate that and knowing their understanding of the tech that we're, describing. But I don't think it's an easy task at all. I think it's something that requires constant, refinement.
Yeah. And then, in your line of business, you have another constituency to please, and that's auditors.
Yes.
Right? And
yes.
that's a whole different language. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's audits, or we're finishing up our PCI audit right now. So we are right in the middle of that. I led our PCI audit for a couple of years, so I'm very familiar with that realm. And that's another translation, because it's, okay, you're taking something and showing it to executives to explain, how they can make business decisions on it. But then you have to take that same data set and show it to your auditor and explain to them, yes, of course, your auditor should know the tool and should know, the
you would hope.
basics. Yes, should. But, with that, you need to still explain to them how it works within your environment. And that's another thing that we use Qualys for every year is, it's for the PCI scans, that's huge for us, having to, display that, but then also, having the data to show, this is how we're actually using this in our vulnerability management program.
Excellent. So, look, we're not here to do a commercial necessarily for Qualys, but so it sounds like Qualys is giving you the ability, though, to really pivot. No pivot tables, I'm staying away from that, but, to pivot the views and slice the information to the audience that you need to present to.
Listen, if you want to talk pivot tables, then we're in Excel, and that's completely my
Yeah,
love language.
no.
So we can get there.
Yeah, no.
But no.
No, it's like garlic to vampires
Okay.
to me. I can't do that.
Then we won't go there. But yeah, and it's it's interesting. I think when I kind of first really started getting into the industry, it was okay. Vulnerability scanners are that they're just a scanner, and so it's been interesting to see how, yes, Qualys, but also just the technologies overall have kind of evolved to, okay, now we're not just scanning. Now it's an active tracking, which that's going to be huge in PCI 4.0 is
Sure it
continuous
is.
compliance.
Yep.
And having an agent that's constantly keeping up with that, and to things like automating patching. So it's okay. We found the vulnerability. Well, now what do we do with that? And the fact that we're getting to a point. We just had a talk this morning with Robert Herjavec. I'm sure I butchered that, but
I know who you mean.
yes.
They do too.
Yeah, he made a point about the technology is becoming more commoditized and that it's going to be more about context. And I think it's really true that you see that in just how many technologies there are out there. There's so much that you can automate, but it's still a question of, okay, but what do you do with that? And how do you use that to improve your security posture?
Absolutely. A lesson I learned, and it's as relevant today as it was then, was just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Absolutely.
And, when it comes to automation especially, we really do. We need to say, can we? Yes. Should we? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And you got to be smart about that. But you're right. Technology is ubiquitous. Vulnerability scanning, quite
Yeah.
frankly. I come from a world where we used to have to convince people to scan once a year.
Oh my gosh.
And it was only post, like already
Yeah.
deployed infrastructure, not like the idea of scanning your apps before you do, unheard of. But, so we've come so long. But we still struggle with the automation. And look, I started DevOps.com about 8 years ago. And that was one of the reasons, I felt it would be great for security. But I also knew that DevOps brought this whole idea of continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous everything. And security had to get with that program.
Absolutely.
If we were going to keep up with, because things move too fast. You can't have point in time stuff. It just doesn't work.
Well, the automation gets tough too because it's you don't want to break anything. You don't want to break your
No.
business processes.
Absolutely.
But I think it's been nice to see, and I kind of an approach we tend to take on things is, okay, if I can automate the actual work, but I'm going to choose when to push that automation.
Yeah.
So there still has to be kind of a person pushing the button.
Right. Much as in DevOps, there had to be a person doing
Yeah.
deploy. Now, pushing a button to deploy was a lot easier than what we used to have to do.
Exactly.
And that's where I think we need to be in security as well.
Yeah.
Elaine, thank you so much for being with
course.
us today. I don't know if we mentioned mercuryfinancial.com
Yes,
was the
that's
website.
correct.
Good luck on your presentation.
Thank
We're going
you
to be
so
watching
much.
and keep up. And you know what? 5 years in the industry, she did it. You can too. So for those of you
Absolutely.
out there, there's plenty of jobs in security. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back in a moment here in Vegas.